This educational piece will explain the primary elements that comprise the classification system for workers' compensation and employers' liability insurance in New Jersey. The classification system is made up of approximately 550 codes that describe the operations of an employer in the aggregate. The intent of the classification system is to group employers that operate in a similar capacity or compete in the same economic sphere, and provides for one employer to not realize an economic advantage over a competitor, the opportunity for employers to influence their premium through the experience rating program, and establishes a premium and loss basis for an industry segment that can be used in the evaluation and promulgation of rates. Each classification description or phraseology attempts to outlay the scope of operations contemplated by the classification. The phraseology will also identify if the classification includes operations that are generally separately rated, such as clerical, sales, or drivers. The phraseology may contain specific restrictions, such as an NPD, or identify certain operations that are to be separately rated, and the operational restrictions apply accordingly. The governing classification describes the operations of the employer. It is the classification, other than a standard exception, which carries the largest amount of payroll. Additionally, it determines the minimum premium applied to a policy. Part 3, Section 3, Rule 18 of the New Jersey Workers' Compensation and Employers' Liability Manual establishes the Single Enterprises Rule and stipulates that the classification system seeks to assign a single governing classification that most accurately represents an employer's operations in the aggregate. The rule determines that all related operations and payroll, unless restricted by manual rule or classification phraseology, are assigned to the governing code, other than allowable standard exceptions. When a risk is made up of separate operations that do not typically prevail in the governing classification, Manual Rule 3319, or the Multiple Enterprises Rule, establishes that a higher rated classification may be used provided the operations are not a general inclusion, the division is not restricted by the governing classification phraseology, and it is not restricted by any other manual rule. In instances when a lower rated classification is being applied, the following additional requirements must be satisfied. The entire operation must be conducted without interchange of labor at a separate location or physically separate from the other operations. The risk must conduct the operations as a separate undertaking with separate payroll records. Standard exceptions are defined by Manual Rule 3326 and are used to identify employees and exposure that is understood to be outside the hazard contemplated by the governing classification. The payroll for employees that meet the manual definition for standard exceptions are permitted to be separately rated. Standard exception classifications are clerical, Code 8810, sales, Code 8742, and drivers, Code 7380. General inclusions, defined by Manual Rule 3324, are the secondary operations of an employer that are understood to be included in all governing classifications, other than standard exceptions, or when restricted by the classification phraseology. The general inclusions are aircraft travel by employees, other than dedicated flight crew, commissary or restaurant employees, except in conjunction with construction, erection, lumber, or mining operations. The manufacture of containers, bags, barrels, bottles, boxes, cans, cartons, or packing cases, plant hospitals or dispensaries, maintenance or ordinary repair of an insured's building or equipment, and printing or lithography. Manual Rule 3325 defines general exclusions as the secondary operations of an employer that must be separately rated unless provided for in the classification phraseology or restricted by division of payroll rules. The general inclusions are aircraft operations, maintenance or repair work if performed by contractors, and all new construction or structural alteration work performed by employees or a contractor, stevedoring operations, and sawmill operations. The classification of construction or erection risks, as delineated in Manual Rule 3320, provides for the separate classification for each distinct type of construction or erection work, provided the work is specifically described by a separate classification. Separate payroll records are maintained. The work at a job location or contract is not restricted by a specific or general NPD qualification, and the work does not typically prevail in connection with another classification. In instances where proper payroll records are not maintained, the highest rated classification for the job or location shall apply.
For general questions regarding classifications, please contact an NJCRIB underwriter at 973-622-6014, extension 4, or for specific questions regarding an employer's classification, please visit our website at njcrib.com and access the tab for the Underwriting Inquiry portal. Thank you for your time.